a little bit of a brief review of the rendering process. It's been a while, I recognize. I am getting lots of questions about rendering, so I'll do two videos in total. One for just rendering using the rendering engine built into Revit. I'll do a second brief video for just review rendering in the cloud, which is probably the preferential way between the two, only because it's faster. That being said, the annoying part of all this, well, one of the, I guess, 1,000 annoying parts of us working from home right now, is that not everyone has access to the rendering in a cloud option because it requires the internet. And for those of you who took computers home from the lab, unless you have a network adapter or something to get that computer online to work, then you can't use render in the cloud, which I'm sure you already know at this point because you also can't use it to find content or whatever, and you're stuck kind of shuffling in families from another device via USB or something, and then getting them into your model that way. And that works for finding families, but rendering in a cloud with no internet simply doesn't do anything. So I'm going to kind of take a step back from the cloud and go into just regular old render first, because everyone has access to this anyway. It is good to know that rendering normally with the render button or render in a cloud can return different results. It does calculate lighting differently, so whether you use one or the other, if you're trying regular rendering and it's not kind of working, and you have ability to use the cloud, give it a shot just to see what it does in comparison to rendering. Otherwise, if you're looking to render, well, there is always a coarse rendering option. Now, I've been kind of lightly trashing my building all along, but it wasn't until I made the 3D view that I realized how generic my generic building is. There's nothing to this building at all. There's no shape whatsoever. So I put a grass texture on just so I had something. Otherwise, this is what I'm going to march ahead and use for my rendering anyway, because it's all I have. The options I see, of course, are still the same as you guys, just your buildings should look a whole lot nicer than mine, and they really, really should look much nicer than this. Render. Do I want to save? Nah, I'm good. Just kind of briefly going through this stuff. I mean, a lot of this stuff you'll recognize immediately, like the quality settings. Not hard to know that the higher the quality, the longer it's going to take. That's the important takeaway. Rendering in draft just to get a sense for how things look is still common. I do want to review this though, output settings. It's going to default to the screen resolution when you first open up the dialog, and that's fine. You can make higher quality images by going to printer and then jacking up the DPI. DPI means dots per inch, so really the more dots you have in an inch means the more detail you're trying to show in an image. So going hand in hand with the quality, the more DPI, the larger the image file, which means the longer it takes to render. And there's definitely a trade-off too. I mean, 150 DPI is probably fine. You guys are no longer concerned with how these look on an overhead, on a projector rather, for a final thesis presentation, because we aren't doing that anymore. And so really you just need some nice, decently quality images to submit along with your thesis project. So honestly, any of these will work fine. 150 is probably fine. 75, 75 is a little bit on the low side in terms of its height and width in pixels. It's actually a pretty small picture. 150, it's a decently sized image, almost pushing up towards what we would call 1080p resolution, high def. 300, that's a big picture. So anyway, 150 or 300 probably are two best spots to hang around, just to be safe. Depending on what you're doing as well, pay attention to the lighting scheme. There are different schemes for interior or exterior, and you can try combinations of things too. Once again, light is a light, so you can try one or the other to see what works best for you. But really, you should be able to choose what really applies to your building. This is an exterior rendering, so I'm looking for exterior lights only. I have no lights on the inside anyway that I want to shine through, so I could choose artificial only, or if I had lights inside I wanted to kind of try to see hot spots from, I could choose sun and artificial. Sun only. Let me backtrack for a second. Yeah, sun only, right? There is an ambient light source always in your model, which would be the sun, or the fake sun. And for those of you who have a lot of lighting perhaps hanging around, you can come in here and turn off lighting or tweak things a little bit. Just depends on what you're actually doing. Don't forget to include background image. Download something, create something, choose image, pick your picture. I have no real images here. And you can adjust the offset to move the image up and down, up or down within your model. And often it's hard to tell exactly where it falls until you do a render. So once again, insert an image, do a draft mode render to see how high or low that image is versus your fake ground, and then you can adjust with an offset after the fact. Beyond all that stuff too, make sure you pay attention to this button. Adjusting the exposure is our way to tweak the coloration of an object or your model you're rendering after you've actually finished the render. And to do that, I'll do mine pretty quickly here. So, medium render, I'll say, or printer of 150, fine. And let's see how long it takes. Hopefully it's pretty quick. It should be quick because there isn't a lot of detail in my drawing whatsoever. That is something else, is it not? Grass texture always looks lovely. I'm very pleased with that. The black background is... Where's the void? Usually there's that grayish haze where it's the horizon meeting your topo surface. But I think I have maybe something blocking it right now. Anyway, this was all created just as a means to talk about the Adjust Exposure button. So, adjusting the exposure gives you a chance to really kind of to saturate your drawing with color, increase the shadows and the highlights and so on. You can do all this stuff after the fact too, but you probably would require a different software once you've actually made and exported the image. So, be a little bit brighter. Saturation. See, the grass gets greener. They're all really sensitive to movement too. So don't go thinking that you want to be really bright and jack it all the way up to here and click apply, because then it looks like that. Where this yellow came from, I have no idea. It's just because of the intensity, I guess. Maybe it's the sunlight hitting the building, that slight yellowish color. So a little goes a long way for most of these things. Brighter, like that's pretty bright, right? So if you get it all out of sorts and you don't know how to fix things, there is a reset button in the corner here as well. So clicking reset, and all the sliders go back to where they were when you originally started. Oof. Maybe a little bit more green in the grass. There we go. And okay. Saving this to the project will just save an image actually in the project browser. The quality of the image it saves is not great compared to actually exporting this thing. So the preference would definitely be to click export and save it somewhere where it's easy for you to find. I would choose a PNG file as my option. A JPEG is a compressed image format, meaning that the file size is small, easily sent through email, but in order to make the file size small, it does have a reduction in quality, which we're not usually trying to do, right? We're not usually that concerned with emailing something or how big a picture file is. So the PNG, or even a TIFF file, these are both uncompressed formats, and there's no reduction in quality. So clicking on that, 3D view number 1, and save, and that just goes and saves a copy of that to my desktop, in my case. Which is, what did I call this thing again? 3D. Oh, there it is. So, there's my exported image, now free of my project, which I can use in slideshows or whatever you want to use it in. So those brief things, brief few options, are really most of what comprises the rendering engine here in Revit. It's definitely a trial and error process, which you guys all know already, so be sure you really do use the draft option just to get a sense for how things look before finalizing it and putting it on high or medium. Medium or high would do well for us anyway. Best just increases the time it takes to render, and it's a significant increase too depending on the model, and really it's very hard to tell beyond high. But also, if stuff looks wrong and it just can't get the coloration right or the blends of textures and so on, increasing it to high and best, it can have an impact. So that's something else again that you can try out if you have any reason to try it out. But if your images look great on high, then I would probably stick with that and leave it alone, just to save time.